There's something your brain does every single day that quietly drains your financial future. And the terrifying part is that it feels like wisdom. It feels like caution. It feels like you're being responsible. You wake up on a Monday morning, hit snooze twice, stare at the ceiling for a few seconds too long, and feel something you can't quite name. It's not sadness. It's not fear, exactly. It's more like a low hum, a pressure. The sense that something is slightly off, that the life you're living doesn't fully belong to you, even though nothing technically went wrong. You have a job. You have stability. You have a salary that hits your account at the same time every month. And yet, that feeling doesn't go away. Because your brain, the very organ designed to keep you alive, has been running a program in the background that was built for survival, not for wealth. And this program has one core directive: don't lose what you already have. This is not a character flaw. This is not laziness. This is not a lack of discipline. What's happening inside your mind has a name, and once you understand it, the next 10 years of your financial life will never look the same again. But first, I need you to understand something deeply uncomfortable. The thing that's keeping you from building real wealth isn't your salary. It isn't the economy. It isn't even your boss. It's a mechanism so woven into your psychology that most people will spend their entire lives inside it without ever seeing it from the outside. Let's go in. Meet Marcus. He's 34. He works for a federal agency, a stable government job with good benefits, a predictable schedule, and the kind of job security that his parents used to say was the definition of success. And they weren't wrong. In their world, a guaranteed salary was the finish line. Marcus doesn't hate his job. He doesn't love it either. It's just there, furniture, safe, familiar, and occupying space that might have been used for. Every few months, Marcus has an idea, a side business he could start, a real estate investment he's been researching, a certification course that would open doors he hasn't walked through yet. He spends hours on YouTube watching other people explain these opportunities. He takes notes. He gets excited. He tells himself he'll start next month. Next month never comes. But here's what's interesting about Marcus, and about you, if you've recognized yourself in him. It's not that he doesn't believe those opportunities are real. He does. It's not that he doesn't know the theory of investing. He's read enough to explain compound interest at a dinner party. The reason Marcus doesn't move isn't intellectual. It's visceral. It lives in the body, not the mind. And it activates every single time he gets close to pulling the trigger on something new. It's the feeling of potential loss, not actual loss, not confirmed loss, the mere possibility of loss. And that possibility sends a signal through his nervous system louder than any opportunity, any data point, any rational argument could ever produce. This is what behavioral economists call loss aversion. And it was first formally described by two psychologists who changed the way we understand human decision-making, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. In 1979, they introduced what they called prospect theory, a framework that revealed something astonishing about how humans evaluate choices. The pain of losing something is approximately twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the equivalent thing. Lose $100, and the emotional weight of that loss is not equal to the joy of finding $100. It's double, sometimes more. This asymmetry rewrites everything we think we know about rational behavior. Because if your brain weights losses twice as heavily as gains, then you're not making financial decisions based on logic. You're making them based on the emotional calculus of survival. And survival calculus was designed for a world where losing meant dying, not a world where losing means temporary setback. But your brain doesn't know the difference. The same neural circuitry that fired when your ancestors faced predators fires when you open a brokerage account for the first time. The same alarm system that protected hunters from famine activates when you consider leaving a stable job for something uncertain. Your amygdala, the threat detection center, doesn't distinguish between a lion in the grass and a financial risk on a spreadsheet. It just knows this feels like loss. Retreat. And retreating is exactly what Marcus does, every time. Not because he's weak, because his brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do, protect him from perceived danger. The problem is that the danger is the very thing that would free him. Here's where it gets more complex. Loss aversion isn't just about investing. It's about how you hold on to what you already have, sometimes beyond all rationality. Behavioral economists call this the endowment effect, the tendency to overvalue things simply because they belong to you. Your current salary feels more valuable than a hypothetical higher income somewhere else, even if the numbers favor the move. Your job title, your pension, your work relationships, they feel irreplaceable not because they necessarily are, but because they are yours. And your brain has been filing them under "do not lose" for years. This is, the invisible architecture of Marcus's stagnation, and it's yours too. The cruel irony is that the people who most need to take financial risks, those with stable but limited income, those on salary plateaus, those with good jobs that offer no upside, are also the people whose brains are most deeply conditioned to avoid risk, because stability itself conditions you for loss aversion. The longer you go without experiencing loss, the more catastrophically your brain models what loss would feel. You've been so protected from financial pain that your brain treats any risk of that pain as existential, and so the fortress that was supposed to be your foundation becomes the walls of a prison you built yourself. But Marcus doesn't see the prison yet. He still calls it home. Now here's the concept I want you to sit with. I'm going to give it a name, because once you name a thing, you can see it. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. I call it the invisible poverty tax, not the kind of poverty tax you read about in economics papers, not a financial instrument or a government policy, something more insidious. The invisible poverty tax is the compounding cost of all the decisions you didn't make because your brain was more afraid of losing what you had than interested in gaining what you could. It's not the money you lost, it's the money that was never born, the investments that were never made, the businesses that were never started, the assets that were never acquired, because loss aversion dressed itself up as wisdom and you believed it. It doesn't show up on a bank statement, it doesn't send you a bill, but it collects year after year in the gap between where you are and where you could be. And for someone like Marcus, for someone like you, it's been collecting for a long time. Let's go deeper, because understanding the name isn't enough. You need to see how this tax is levied at every layer of your financial life. The first layer is the layer of inaction dressed as patience. You've told yourself you're waiting for the right moment, waiting for more information, waiting until the market is less volatile, waiting until the kids are older, waiting until after the holidays. And this waiting feels responsible. It feels like diligence. But here's what Kahneman's research shows. Most of the time, the right moment logic is a rationalization generated after the fact. The brain decides first, based on threat response. Then it constructs reasons that sound intelligent. You don't wait because of data. You wait because waiting preserves the status quo, and the status quo feels like safety. What is the cost of that patience? Over a decade of waiting to invest, even in something as simple as an index fund, doesn't just mean missing gains. It means missing compounding. The eighth wonder of the world, as it's been called, works silently and exponentially, but only when you're in the game. Every year outside the game isn't neutral. It's a year of compounding that belongs to someone else. The invisible tax was just collected. You didn't feel it, but it happened. Ask yourself, what have you been waiting for that's already cost you more than the risk you were afraid of? The second layer is the layer of false security. This is perhaps the most dangerous layer for someone in a stable position. False security is the illusion that because nothing bad is happening now, nothing bad can happen. It's the comfort of the paycheck that arrives on schedule, the pension that seems guaranteed, the career that shows no immediate signs of danger. And Marcus lives here. His job is secure, for now. But the economy is not static. Industries are not immortal. Governments restructure. Bureaucracies downsize. Technology automates. The world that produced the concept of lifetime employment no longer exists in the same form, and yet the psychological programming of that era, the deep belief that a stable job is a complete financial strategy, persists. Because losing a stable job was once the worst thing that could happen. And so the brain, in its deep evolutionary memory, treats stable job as the equivalent of survival itself. But here's what false security actually costs. It costs you the development of financial skills you'll need if the security ever disappears. It costs you the muscle memory of risk tolerance. It costs you the network, the mindset, the portfolio that would catch you if the floor gave way. False security doesn't just fail to protect you from risk. It leaves you completely unprepared for it. What would your financial life look like today if your job ended tomorrow? The third layer is the sunk cost spiral. You've been at your job for 8 years. You're close to a milestone, a pension vesting date, a promotion cycle, a tenure review. Leaving now would mean losing everything you've already put in. And that feeling is so powerful that it keeps you anchored even when the opportunity cost of staying is enormous. This is one of the most documented and consistently irrational human behaviors in all of economics. The tendency to continue an investment of time, money, or energy, not because the future return justifies it, but because the past investment feels too painful to abandon. Economists call it the sunk cost fallacy. Behaviorally, it's pure loss aversion applied to your personal history. The years you've already spent are gone. They can't be recovered. The only relevant question is, what does the next 10 years look like from here? But loss aversion makes that question nearly impossible to answer clearly, because the shadow of those previous years falls over every calculation you try to make. Marcus has 7 more years until his pension fully vests. He tells himself he just needs to get there, but he's spent the last 8 years telling himself the same thing about different milestones. The horizon keeps moving. The tax keeps collecting. How many decisions are you currently making based on time you've already spent rather than time you have left? The fourth layer is the comparison anchor. You measure your financial reality not against what's possible, but against what you fear losing. This is called reference point dependence, another key insight from prospect theory. You don't evaluate an opportunity in absolute terms. You evaluate it relative to a reference point, usually your current state. And because losses from that reference point feel twice as painful as gains feel good, the reference point becomes a psychological anchor that distorts every decision you make. When someone tells you about an investment with a potential 20% annual return, you don't just calculate the upside, you calculate the downside. You imagine what losing 20% would feel like, and because that imagined pain is double the imagined pleasure, your brain effectively treats a 50-50 opportunity as if the loss scenario were twice as likely, even when the math says otherwise. You're not bad at math. Your brain is running a different calculation than you think. What would change if you started measuring your opportunities against your potential rather than against your current position? The fifth layer, and this is where it gets deeply personal, is the identity layer. Over years of working in a stable position, your identity and your job security have merged, not intentionally, gradually. The way water shapes stone, you've become someone who doesn't take financial risks. It's not just a behavior anymore, it's a self-concept. And self-concepts are among the most powerfully protected constructs in human psychology, more than possessions, more than ideas, more than almost anything else. This is why the most threatening form of loss aversion isn't the fear of losing money. It's the fear of losing yourself, the version of yourself that is defined by caution, by stability, by never having failed financially. Because if you try something new and it doesn't work, you don't just lose the investment. You lose the story you've been telling about who you are. And the identity loss is something your brain will go to extraordinary lengths to prevent. Nobel laureate Richard Thaler, whose work expanded Kahneman and Tversky's foundations into what we now call behavioral economics, demonstrated repeatedly that people will accept economically irrational outcomes to avoid the psychological cost of identity-threatening decisions. They'll hold losing stocks for years. They'll stay in dead-end careers for decades, not because they can't do the math, because they can't bear the story. Marcus isn't afraid of losing money. He's afraid of losing Marcus. The cautious, stable, responsible version of Marcus who has never made a mistake, because he's never made a move. But there's something that happens at the end of this layer something most people don't let themselves see. Because the tax here isn't just financial. The invisible poverty tax at the identity layer collects in the currency of who you never became. The version of you that built something. The version that proved to themselves, not to anyone else, that they were capable of more than what a salary determined. That version doesn't get a second chance later. That chance is now. But there's something that most people do here, right at the edge of this realization. They turn back. And it's not cowardice. It's something more, subtle, and it's where everything falls apart. Let's talk about the resistance you're already feeling. Because if you've made it this far, some part of your brain is pushing back. It's generating objections, and they sound rational. They sound like wisdom. But they're the tax collector dressed in a suit. I'm different. My pension is solid. I'm not Marcus. Maybe. But consider this. The countries with the strongest pension systems have some of the lowest rates of personal wealth accumulation among their citizens. Not because the citizens are less capable, because the safety net reduces the perceived need to develop financial independence. Security, paradoxically, can function as a ceiling. The better your floor, the less urgently you feel the need to build walls and a roof. It's not the right time. I'll start investing when the market stabilizes. In 2008, the market collapsed. In 2020, it collapsed again. In every case, the people who stayed in, or entered during, the crash, built more wealth than those who waited for clarity. Clarity never comes in advance, it only appears in retrospect, and you can't invest in retrospect. I only have 5 years left until milestone. I can't risk it now. This one is the most painful, because 5 years is not a short time, it's 1,925 days. It's approximately 43,800 working hours. It's 5 years of compounding that either works for you or against you, and I'll figure it out after the milestone plan almost. Universally fails, because the milestone is followed by a new milestone, and the deferral continues until the window closes. I tried once and it didn't work. One data point does not constitute a pattern. But the way loss aversion processes experience, one failure carries the emotional weight of many successes, which means if you failed once and let that single experience define your entire financial strategy, you're living proof of Kahneman's thesis. The pain of that one loss outweighed every piece of evidence that suggested a different outcome was possible. Here's the real cost, not in dollars, in Sundays. Think about the last 10 Sunday evenings. How many of them felt free? How many of them had that low hum underneath? That sense that Monday was a sentence being served, not a day being chosen. That feeling is not nothing. That feeling is data. It's your nervous system telling you that the life you're living costs more than the salary it pays. The real cost of the invisible poverty. Tax is not financial poverty, it's experiential poverty. It's the conversations you never had because you were always tired from work, the projects you never started because you were saving your energy for someone else's agenda, the risks you never took because your brain kept billing you twice for every potential loss, the version of your life that was possible but wasn't built. Here's where the story changes, and I want to be precise about this, because the change is not what most people think it is. The goal is not to eliminate loss aversion. It can't be eliminated, it's neurological. The goal is not to become reckless, to quit your job tomorrow, to bet everything on a startup. The goal is something far more specific and far more powerful. The goal is to use stability as leverage, not as a destination. Marcus, when we last left him, was stuck in the 8th year of a 10-year cycle. Waiting, collecting the invisible poverty tax and calling it patience. But here's what Marcus started doing differently. He stopped asking, what if I lose, and started asking, what does it cost me to wait? That shift seems small. It isn't. It rewires the reference point. Instead of anchoring his analysis on the fear of loss, he anchored it on the compounding cost of inaction. He didn't stop being risk-averse. He redirected the aversion. He became afraid of the right thing, the tax. Then he did something specific and uncomfortable. He separated his identity from his job title, not by quitting, not by changing anything externally. Internally, he stopped defining himself by what he couldn't afford to lose. And when the identity stopped requiring protection, the decisions became cleaner. He didn't invest everything at once. He started small, deliberately, asymmetrically. He treated his stable income not as his financial ceiling, but as the foundation that made asymmetric risk possible. Because here's what stability actually gives you when used correctly. It gives you the runway to experiment without catastrophe. A stable income means you can take risks that someone without that income cannot. Your stability, properly understood, is not the cage, it's the launching pad. This is the inversion that changes everything. The same job that felt like a trap is actually a strategic asset, and only if you stop treating it as the entire financial plan. You're not Marcus anymore. You're the person who saw the tax, named it, and refused to keep paying it. What's the smallest, most asymmetric move you could make today that your stable income would make survivable? You've read this far because something in here touched something in you. Maybe it was the Sunday evenings. Maybe it was the sunk cost layer, the milestone you keep waiting for. Maybe it was the moment I described the identity tax and you recognized the version of yourself you've been protecting at the expense of the version you actually want to become. Here's what I want to leave you with. The invisible poverty tax is real. It's collecting right now, even as you read this. Every day you wait for the right moment. Every year you confuse the floor for the ceiling. Every Sunday evening you spend in that low hum. Those are payments. Silent, automatic, compounding. But here's what's also true. You can stop paying it. Not by abandoning everything you've built. Not by pretending the risks aren't real. By seeing the mechanism clearly. The way fear of loss distorts your decision-making, doubles the weight of potential downsides, anchors you to a version of yourself that no longer serves you. And making one conscious, deliberate, asymmetric move in a different direction. The brain that makes you poor is the same brain that can make you free. The difference is what you're afraid of losing. Marcus made his move on a Tuesday in February, not a dramatic gesture. A small account, a recurring transfer, a conversation he'd been postponing for 2 years. Nothing changed overnight. But something changed in him. The thing that loss aversion had been protecting for years quietly stepped aside. That version of you, the one who stopped paying the tax, is closer than you think. But it requires one thing that no amount of information can give you. Something I'll talk about in the next video. Leave a word in the comments, just one word. The word that describes what you're most afraid of losing. You'll understand why when we continue this conversation. If you want to go deeper, if you want to be part of a community that thinks about money, behavior, and life this way, the link to Mind of Value is in the description. Not tips, not hacks, a new way of seeing. And if this video did something to how you think today, subscribe. Not for more content. For the next layer of the conversation. You've been paying the tax long enough.